The morning Marcus Cole walked out of Ridgemont Correctional Facility, the sky was the color of a bruise, purple at the edges, gray at the center, like even the clouds didn't know whether to cry or just stay cold. It was November 4th, 6:23 in the morning. The temperature hovered at 31 degrees Fahrenheit, and his breath came out in slow white clouds that dissolved into nothing before they got very far. He had a plastic bag in his left hand, a $40 release check in his right, and a single change of clothes that smelled like industrial soap and old regret. He was 44 years old. He had been inside since he was 26. 18 years. And now he stood at the edge of a cracked concrete parking lot, staring at a road he barely recognized, in a world that had kept moving without him, a world that had not waited, had not wondered, and had certainly not saved him a seat. The town of Kettlebrook, Pennsylvania hadn't changed much on the surface. The same hardware store on Route 9. The same diner with the hand-painted pie sign. But everything felt wrong in the way that things feel wrong when you've been away too long, familiar shapes wearing unfamiliar faces. The gas station was a pharmacy now. The old library had become a vape shop. And the house at the end of Sycamore Drive, the one he had painted himself in the summer of 2004, the one with the yellow shutters and the flower box under the front window, had a different name on the mailbox. That name was not Cole. The name on that mailbox belonged to the man who had put him there. But here's the thing about Marcus Cole, the thing nobody in Kettlebrook remembered, the thing the system had buried under 18 years of paperwork and silence. There was something else. Something that had been waiting. Something no one knew about. Not his lawyer. Not the prosecutor. Not even the man who had destroyed his life. A cabin. Deep in the Allegheny woods. Old, forgotten, overgrown. And inside that cabin, something that was going to rewrite every single thing that had happened. Stay with me, because what was found in that cabin didn't just change Marcus Cole's future. It answered an 18-year-old question that nobody had thought to ask. If you've ever been told you were nothing, by a judge, by a system, by someone you trusted with your whole life, this story is for you. If you've ever been made to feel like starting over was the same as giving up, or that being thrown away meant you weren't worth planting somewhere new, then you already understand what Marcus Cole felt standing in that parking lot with $40 and no plan. Being thrown away is not the end of the story. Sometimes it's just the brutal, necessary beginning. Marcus Eugene Cole grew up in Kettlebrook the way most kids in small Pennsylvania towns grew up, quietly, practically, with his hands in the dirt and his mind already somewhere else. His father, Walter Cole, had been a mechanic for 31 years. His mother, Ruth, taught 4th grade at Birchwood Elementary until her knees gave out in 1998. They weren't wealthy people, but they were honest. And in Kettlebrook, honest meant something. Marcus had been the kind of boy who fixed things. At 9, he'd rewired his father's old transistor radio from scratch using a YouTube tutorial, except it wasn't YouTube, it was a library book, because this was 1991 and the internet didn't exist in Kettlebrook yet. At 12, he rebuilt a neighbor's lawn mower engine in exchange for $10 and a bag of apples. At 16, he was the unofficial electrician for half the houses on his block. Not because someone taught him, because he needed to understand how things worked. That need, to understand, to fix, to make something broken work again, was the most important thing about Marcus Cole. Remember that. It matters later. He met Sandra Hargrove at a 4th of July bonfire in 1999. He was 23. She was 21, newly arrived in Kettlebrook from Philadelphia, staying with her cousin while she figured out her next step. She had dark eyes and a laugh that cut through noise like a bell, and she told Marcus on the night they met that she intended to own a restaurant by 30. He believed her completely. They married in 2001. Small ceremony. Backyard. 40 people. Ruth Cole made 3 pies and cried through most of the vows. For 3 years, Marcus worked double shifts at Kellerman's Electrical Supply, the largest contractor in the county, while Sandra built up her catering business from their kitchen table. It was tight some months. There were weeks when they ate pasta 4 nights in a row and laughed about it. But they were building something. Together. And the word, together, had weight back then. Real weight. By 2003, they had a house. By 2004, they had a daughter, a girl they named Lily, 7 pounds 4 ounces, born on a Tuesday in April, the best day Marcus Cole had ever lived through. He stood in that delivery room with tears running down his face and made the kind of silent promise a man only makes once, the kind that lives in the chest, not the head. I will not let anything hurt her. Not ever. He painted the house that summer. Yellow shutters. Flower box under the window. He wanted it to look like a home that had always been happy. It did. That was the problem with beautiful things. Sometimes the wrong people noticed them. Derek Hargrove was Sandra's older brother. He arrived in Kettlebrook in the fall of 2004, 4 weeks after Lily was born, driving a late-model Cadillac and wearing the kind of smile that existed entirely in the teeth and not at all in the eyes. He said he was between opportunities. He said he was just passing through. He stayed for 14 months. Marcus didn't trust Derek from the first handshake. Not because of anything specific, no single red flag, no dramatic warning sign. Just a feeling. The kind of feeling a man who fixes things gets when he picks up a tool and knows before he even turns it over that something is wrong with the weight. Derek was charming. He brought gifts for Lily. He made Sandra laugh in the old way, the Philadelphia way, full of inside jokes and family shorthand that Marcus couldn't enter. He had a talent for making himself useful in small, visible ways while avoiding anything that actually cost him something. He borrowed Marcus's truck 3 times and returned it twice with a quarter tank less. He forgot to pay back $200 he borrowed for a car repair in January. He spent hours on their couch watching television while Marcus worked 60-hour weeks. But none of that was why everything fell apart. Everything fell apart because of Kellerman's. By 2005, Marcus had been promoted to senior electrical contractor at Kellerman's. He ran a crew of 7. He was trusted with accounts that ran into 6 figures. His boss, Don Kellerman, had told him twice, once over lunch at the diner, once in a written review, that Marcus was the most reliable man he'd ever employed. That word, reliable. Marcus had put it somewhere important. And then the money started disappearing. $40,000 over 6 months, siphoned in increments, $800 here, $2,200 there, routed through a third-party materials vendor that didn't actually exist. The name on the dummy account? A variation of Marcus Cole's middle name. The email address tied to the account? Created from a library computer 2 blocks from the Cole house. When Don Kellerman discovered the theft in March of 2006, he was devastated. Not angry, devastated. He said so publicly at the police station, in a voice that barely held together. I thought he was different, Don told the officer. I thought I knew him. Marcus was arrested on a Tuesday, the same day of the week Lily had been born. He was charged with embezzlement and wire fraud. The evidence was what the prosecutor called meticulous. The pattern was clear. The trail, narrow and deliberate, led directly to Marcus. His public defender was 28 years old, 7 months out of law school, and buried under 43 other cases. The trial lasted 4 days. The verdict took the jury 2.5 hours. Marcus Cole was sentenced to 22 years. He served 18 before an overcrowding initiative freed him 4 years early. Here is what he did not know on the day he was arrested, the thing he would not discover until much later, the thing that the cabin in the woods would eventually prove. Derek Hargrove had been inside Kellerman's computer system for 4 months before the first dollar disappeared. But that proof didn't exist yet. Not in any usable form. Not yet. What existed in November 2024, when Marcus walked out of Ridgemont with $40 and a plastic bag, was something much simpler and much harder. Nothing. He had nothing. He had a daughter who was now 20 years old and had been told, very carefully, over many years, by her uncle Derek and her mother Sandra, that her father was a thief. He had a house that no longer had his name on it. He had a criminal record that put a wall between him and every licensed trade in the state. And he had the memory of a life that had been clean and purposeful and the memory of building something with his own hands, the memory of yellow shutters and a flower box under the window and a Tuesday in April when the world had been entirely good. He also had one other thing. A piece of paper. Folded twice. Worn at the creases. Tucked inside the cover of the only book he'd brought out with him. A battered paperback copy of a John Steinbeck novel. On the paper, In his father Walter's handwriting, Walter, who had died of a stroke in 2011 while Marcus was inside, were 12 words. The land on Hollow Creek Road is yours. I registered it. Box 7. Marcus hadn't known what it meant in 2006. He hadn't known what it meant in 2011 when the letter arrived through the prison mail system, already 6 weeks old because of the processing delays, too late to attend the funeral, too late for any of it. He had kept the paper because it was his father's handwriting. Because some things you keep not for meaning but for memory. He was about to find out that this one had both. The first 3 days after his release, Marcus slept in the Kettlebrook Public Library. Not because he had nowhere else to go, there was a halfway house on Clement Street that would take him, but because he needed to think, and the library was quiet and warm, and the night staff, a woman named Arlene who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, didn't ask him to leave if he fell asleep in a chair. He used the library computer to check on Walter's estate. It took most of a morning to navigate the county recorder's website, which had been updated sometime in the past decade and was now either smarter or more broken depending on who you asked. But eventually, on the third page of results, under a property record filed in 2003, there it was. Cole, Walter A. 14.7 acres, Hollow Creek Road, Allegheny County. Recorded February 2003. Transfer upon death, Marcus E. Cole. His father had bought 14.5 acres of forest in 2003. Had never mentioned it. Had paid, according to the public record, $11,000 for it. Had registered the transfer on death deed in Marcus's name with the county clerk on a quiet Tuesday, the way Walter Cole did everything. Without fanfare, without announcement, just steadily and correctly and without making a fuss. Marcus sat back in the library chair and stared at the screen for a long time. 14.5 acres. In the Allegheny Woods. He had been a property owner for 3 days and hadn't known it. The halfway house on Clement Street gave him a room, a narrow rectangle with a single window that faced a brick wall, and 3 meals a day for the first 30 days at no charge, after which he owed $180 a month from whatever work he could find. The case manager, a man named Gary with a calm professional manner and tired eyes, told Marcus to start small. Get a state ID renewed. Report to his parole officer, a woman named Diane Chase in the Kettlebrook District Office, every Thursday. Don't look too far ahead. 1 week at a time, Gary said. I've been doing 1 year at a time for 18 years, Marcus told him. I think I can handle a week. Gary almost smiled. The work Marcus could legally do was limited. His electrical contractor license was gone. Any licensed trade required a background check he couldn't pass. He found day labor through a man named Pete who ran a small construction crew on the east side of the county. Cash work, hard work, 6 in the morning until the job was done. Framing, drywall, hauling. $45 a day to start, $60 if Pete was happy. It wasn't enough to save anything, but it was enough to stay vertical. He bought a used bicycle for $30 from the Church of the Redeemer's Wednesday flea market. 11 miles each way to Pete's job site, on roads that didn't have bike lanes. He left at 4:45 in the morning to be sure. He ate oatmeal every morning. Peanut butter sandwiches at noon. Whatever the halfway house served at 6. He lost 11 pounds in the first month. The humiliation was quieter than he expected, and somehow that made it worse. Nobody screamed at him on the street. Nobody confronted him. What happened instead was the small, slow withdrawal of normalcy, the cashier at the grocery store who didn't make eye contact, the neighbor on Clement who crossed the street when she recognized him, the way Pete's crew went a little quieter when he walked up each morning, the way conversations stopped being easy. He understood it. He didn't resent the people. He resented what had been done to him, what had been done to his name by someone who had sat on his couch and eaten his food and carried his daughter and worn his family's face. He thought about Lily every day. He had written to her twice since his release. No response. He had expected that. He would write again. Being thrown away is not the end of the story. He held on to that. The weather in December was brutal. The temperature dropped to 12 degrees on December 8th. A sharp, dry cold that turned the roads into glass by 5 a.m. and made the 11-mile bike ride genuinely dangerous. Marcus bought a pair of work gloves for $7 and wrapped his ears in an old wool scarf he found in the donation box at the halfway house. The fingers on his right hand went numb by the second mile every morning. He got used to it. On December 14th, Pete's job wrapped early. The general contractor had pushed the timeline back 3 weeks because of a permitting delay. No work until January 7th. Marcus had $43 in his pocket and 3 weeks of nothing ahead of him. He stared at the county property record he'd printed at the library. 14.5 acres. Hollow Creek Road. He found the road on a paper map at the library, 15 miles from Kettlebrook, back into the hills, up a 2-lane road that wasn't maintained past the 3rd mile. He found an address attached to the parcel. He found that no structure was listed on the record. But Walter had said Box 7. The way Walter said things, steady, specific, without waste, that meant something was there. He had 3 weeks and no job. He borrowed a better bicycle from the halfway house's storage room, an older mountain bike with tires that could handle gravel, and on a gray Saturday morning at 7 a.m., with the temperature at 19 degrees and his breath making ghosts in the air, Marcus Cole rode north out of Kettlebrook toward Hollow Creek Road. He had no idea what was waiting for him. That was about to change. The road went to gravel after the 1st mile, and to something barely a road at all after the 3rd. Marcus walked the bike the last quarter mile, pushing through undergrowth that had claimed most of the path, his boots crunching on frozen leaves, the cold air biting at his face with a particular sharpness that comes only from deep woods in December, clean and mean and alive. He almost missed it. The cabin sat back from what remained of the path by maybe 30 feet, half hidden behind 2 enormous white pines that had grown up close on either side over the years. If the angle of the morning light hadn't caught the edge of a metal hinge on the door at exactly the right moment, he might have passed it entirely. He stopped. It was small, maybe 400 square feet, he estimated. Log construction, old-growth timber by the look of it, the kind of wood that had been standing since before Marcus's father was born. The roof had partially collapsed on the far right corner, and a section of the north wall had buckled inward from the weight of a fallen tree limb that now lay across the structure like a casual arm. Moss covered most of the exterior above waist height. 3 of the 4 windows were intact. The 4th was covered with a piece of plywood that had gone black with weather. The door was locked with a padlock. Old but not rusted through. The shackle still firm. Marcus pulled his father's note from his coat pocket. Box 7. He stood in the cold for a moment, reading those 12 words again. His father's handwriting, blocky, careful, the handwriting of a man who had learned to write in a one-room schoolhouse and had never stopped taking it seriously. He found a rock near the tree line, flat and heavy, and broke the padlock in 4 strikes. The door swung inward. The smell hit him first, old wood, cold earth, the particular mustiness of a sealed space that hasn't breathed in years. Then, as his eyes adjusted to the dim interior, a single room, a wood stove in the corner, a narrow wooden shelf running along the back wall, a rusted metal cot frame pushed against the left wall, and, on the floor in the center of the room, a heavy layer of leaves and debris that had blown in through the collapsed roof section. He breathed it in. Then he started looking. The shelf along the back wall held a few objects. A tin coffee mug, a rusted oil lamp, what appeared to be an old mason jar with something dark and unidentifiable inside. Below the shelf, built into the wall itself, were a series of wooden cubby compartments, the kind sometimes used in old rural cabins for storage. Each one was numbered with a small metal tag, hand-stamped. He counted. 1 through 9. Box 7 was in the middle of the lower row. It wasn't locked. It was sealed with a strip of electrical tape around the lid, his father's precise, practical version of a lock. Marcus peeled back the tape carefully, the way you peel something when you're afraid that what's inside might not survive rough handling. Inside the box was a waterproof envelope. Inside the envelope, sealed in a Ziploc plastic bag that had fogged with age, were 3 items. The first, a folded deed of sale for the 14.5 acres, with Walter Cole's name in the buyer line and Marcus Cole's name in the transfer clause, notarized and county stamped. The second, a handwritten letter from Walter Cole, dated September 2005. 14 months before Marcus's arrest. The third, a small USB drive, no larger than a thumbnail, affixed to the back of the letter with a piece of tape. Marcus stood in the cold, half-rotted cabin, holding these three things, and for the first time since he had walked out of Ridgemont Correctional into the purple-gray morning, he didn't feel the weight of 18 years on him like a stone. He felt something different. He felt like his father had known. He sat on the floor of the cabin, on top of the debris, because there was nowhere else, and opened the handwritten letter. Walter's handwriting. Body. Careful. Serious. Marcus, it began. If you're reading this, something went wrong. I don't know what yet. But I've seen the way Derek Hargrove handles other people's things, like they belong to him by right of wanting them. I've been watching him since July. I'm not sure what he's planning. But I know what I saw on my way past the library last Thursday, and I know what a man looks like when he's doing something he doesn't want witnessed. I bought this land 3 years ago. Paid cash. I was going to tell you at Christmas. It's yours when I go, and the deed is legal and registered. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The drive has the photographs. I used that little camera from the drugstore, the disposable kind with the digital chip. I don't know if they'll be clear enough. I was 64 feet away, give or take, through a window. But there's something. If I'm wrong and nothing happened, throw this away and use the land for something good. Build something. If I'm right, find a good lawyer. Don't let them make you feel small. You never were. Not for one day. Love, Dad. The cold in that cabin had been significant before Marcus opened the letter. Now he didn't feel it at all. He rode back to Kettlebrook in a state that wasn't quite calm and wasn't quite panic. Something in between, a tight, focused alertness, like a circuit board that's been shorted and repaired and is running again for the first time in years. His hands on the handlebars were shaking, but not from the cold. He needed to know what was on that drive. The library computers didn't have USB ports that he could access, a security setting installed sometime in the past decade. He asked Arlene, the night staff librarian, who regarded him over her reading glasses with practical sympathy and told him there was a computer repair shop on Mill Street, a man named Theo who charged $15 an hour and wasn't particular about what you needed to look at. Theo's shop smelled of solder and coffee, and Theo himself was 61, bearded, and wearing a flannel shirt with a pen tucked behind each ear. He charged Marcus $12 flat because the drive was easy to read and the files didn't need recovering. They were intact, just very old JPEG format from a 2005 digital disposable camera. 43 photographs. Out of 43, 11 were too blurry or too dark to be clearly useful. 32 were clear enough to see. Marcus sat in Theo's back room, in a wooden chair that creaked, and looked at every single one. His father had been 64 feet away and slightly to the left, shooting through a library window at an angle on a Thursday afternoon in September 2005. The images were small resolution, slightly grainy, with the washed-out quality of disposable digital cameras from that era. But they were clear enough to show Derek Hargrove at a library computer terminal. Clear enough to show, in 4 sequential shots, Derek typing on a keyboard while referencing a handwritten piece of paper. Clear enough, in one particular shot, the clearest of all, where Derek had leaned back slightly in his chair at an angle that aligned perfectly with the window, to show, on the screen in front of him, what appeared to be an email interface with a name in the sender field. Not Derek Hargrove's name. A name built from Marcus Cole's middle name, Eugene Cole. The email address Walter had photographed, through a library window, with a drugstore disposable camera, 64 years old, acting on nothing more than an old mechanic's quiet suspicion, was the dummy account. The one the prosecution had used as the cornerstone of their case. The one tied to the false materials vendor. The one that had sent and received the correspondence that had been presented at trial as evidence of Marcus's guilt. Derek Hargrove had created it. Derek Hargrove had used it. And Walter Cole had photographed him doing it, 5 months before a single dollar disappeared from Kellerman's accounts. Marcus stared at the screen for 4 minutes without blinking. Then he said, quietly, to no one in particular, "Dad, you saw it." Theo, pretending to be busy with a hard drive across the room, said nothing. But he reached over and refilled Marcus's coffee without being asked. The question now was whether any of this was usable. Photographs from a 2005 disposable camera, stored for 19 years on a USB drive in a cabin in the woods, taken by a man who was now dead. This was not straightforward. Marcus knew enough about the law from 18 years of reading library books to know that knowing something and proving something were completely different countries, and the road between them was long and full of obstacles. He needed a lawyer. Not a 28-year-old public defender. A real one. The problem was that real lawyers cost real money, and Marcus Cole had $31 to his name. He spent 2 days researching the library again. He searched Pennsylvania Innocence Project, wrongful conviction attorneys, post-conviction relief. He found a name, cited in 3 separate news articles about overturned convictions in western Pennsylvania, a woman named Catherine Voss of Voss and Harwell, a Pittsburgh-based firm that had successfully argued 14 post-conviction cases in the past decade. In 2 of them, new digital evidence had been the turning point. He called the office collect from the halfway house phone. The receptionist was polite and efficient and told him that Ms. Voss did not typically accept collect calls but that she could give him an email address. Marcus explained, briefly, that he didn't have consistent email access. There was a pause. "Hold one moment, please." He was on hold for 6 minutes. Then a different voice, brisk, direct, with the focused efficiency of someone who had learned to decide quickly. "This is Catherine Voss. Tell me what you have." "You have 3 minutes." He told her in 2. Another pause. Longer. "What format are the photographs in?" JPEG. 43 files. 32 usable. One showing a screen with what appears to be the email address from the prosecution's evidence. "My father's letter explains what he saw and when." "Where are you located?" "Kettlebrook." "I don't have a car." "I'll be there Thursday." "Don't show those files to anyone else. Don't make copies until I've seen them." "Can you secure the drive?" "Yes." "Then do that. Don't talk to the press. Don't talk to the original prosecutor's office. Don't reach out to Derek Hargrove or Sandra Cole. This is important. Don't reach out to anyone involved in the original case." "I understand." "Mr. Cole, I'm not making any promises yet." "I know. But I'll be honest. What you're describing, if it holds up, it's not nothing." He wrapped the USB drive in a clean handkerchief and put it in the inside pocket of his coat. He wore that coat to sleep that night. He didn't entirely mean to. He just didn't take it off. Catherine Voss arrived Thursday morning at 9 a.m. in a gray Volvo sedan. She was 53, precise in her movements, and she shook Marcus's hand the way people shake hands when they intend to follow through. She set up a laptop on the library's public table, and Marcus handed her the drive. She went through the photographs without speaking. Her face gave very little away. She read Walter's letter twice. She read the deed once. Then she opened her laptop and pulled up the original trial documents. She had requested them digitally before making the drive from Pittsburgh. At one point she stopped. She enlarged one of the photographs on screen. She looked at it for 30 seconds. Then she said, "This is the email address from Exhibit 14C. "I know," Marcus said. "Your father photographed Derek Hargrove creating the account that was used to frame you." "Yes. In 2005. Before any theft occurred. 5 months before." She was quiet for another moment. Then she said something Marcus did not expect. "Mr. Cole, I've been doing this for 22 years. I want to be careful about your expectations. Digital forensics has come a long way, and authenticating 19-year-old JPEG files from a disposable camera is going to take time and expert work. The prosecution will challenge provenance. Derek Hargrove will have attorneys." "I know. But," she closed the laptop, looked at him directly, "I'm going to take this case. Pro bono, pending the forensic review. And if the review confirms what I'm looking at right now," she paused, "Derek Hargrove is going to have a very difficult few months." For a long moment, Marcus Cole didn't say anything. Then, "My father bought 14 acres of woods and hid the proof in a cabin I didn't know about because he didn't know who else to trust." "Your father was a very careful man," Catherine said. "He was a mechanic," Marcus said. "He just knew when something was wrong with the weight." The forensic process took 11 weeks. During those 11 weeks, Marcus Cole continued to exist, which was, in its own way, the hardest thing he had ever done. He went back to work with Pete's crew in January. He rode the mountain bike 11 miles in the cold and 11 miles back. He ate oatmeal and peanut butter and halfway house dinners. He wrote a third letter to Lily. He did not receive a response, but he wrote a fourth. Catherine's firm hired a digital forensic specialist named Dr. Anita Bott out of Carnegie Mellon, a woman who had testified in 9 federal cases and whose methodology had never successfully been challenged in court. Bott's analysis of the USB drive, the camera chip data embedded in the JPEG metadata, and the timestamps recorded in the library's computer system archive, which Voss obtained through a records request, noting that Kettlebrook Public Library had digitized its terminal usage logs back to 2001, was thorough, meticulous, and unambiguous. The photographs had been taken on September 18, 2005, between 2:14 p.m. and 2:47 p.m., at Terminal Number 4 of the Kettlebrook Public Library. The library's terminal log showed an anonymous session at Terminal 4 during that exact window. A record subpoena to the internet service provider that had hosted the dummy email domain showed the account's creation date, September 18, 2005. Time of creation, 2:31 p.m. Walter Cole had photographed Derek Hargrove creating the account at 2:31 p.m. on September 18, 2005. The email the prosecution had presented at trial as evidence of Marcus's guilt, the email that had established the fake materials vendor and initiated the first transfer, had been sent from that account 4 months later, in January 2006. Marcus Cole had been in a 12-hour shift at Kellerman's on September 18, 2005. His time card, subpoenaed from the County Employment Records Archive, confirmed it. He could not have been at that library terminal. Derek Hargrove had a credit card receipt, also subpoenaed, from a hardware store 3 blocks from the library, timestamp September 18, 2005 at 1:52 p.m. 22 minutes before the library session began. The chain was complete. Catherine Voss filed the post-conviction relief petition in February. It was 47 pages long. It included Dr. Bott's report, the photographic evidence, the library records, the time card, the credit card receipt, and Walter Cole's letter, notarized by a retired justice of the peace who had known Walter for 30 years. The petition requested full exoneration on all charges, expungement of the criminal record, and a hearing into criminal charges against Derek Hargrove. The Allegheny County District Attorney's Office, faced with the petition, did not fight it. They couldn't. Derek Hargrove found out about the petition on a Tuesday. He found out through Sandra, who had been contacted by Catherine Voss's office as part of the notification process. Sandra had told Derek because they were still, this was not a surprise to anyone who had known them, living in the house on Sycamore Drive. The house Marcus had painted with yellow shutters. Derek's first move was to hire a lawyer. His second was to call Don Kellerman, whom he had apparently stayed in loose contact with over the years, and suggest that the evidence was fabricated, that someone had manipulated the metadata, that it was a conspiracy by a disgruntled ex-convict to settle a personal score. Don Kellerman listened to all of this carefully. Then Don Kellerman called Catherine Voss's office. He told her that he had, over the past 18 years, reviewed the internal accounts from 2005 and 2006 many times, and that there had always been one detail that hadn't sat right, a purchase order for materials from a vendor he'd verified as legitimate at the time, but which, looking back at the address on the invoice, had been located at an address that he later discovered, during a 2009 renovation, was actually a vacant lot. He had never said anything because Marcus had already been convicted. He had assumed he'd made an error in his original review. He had not made an error. "I owe that man something," Don said. He submitted a voluntary affidavit. Derek Hargrove was arrested on a Thursday in March, charged with wire fraud, identity theft, and obstruction of justice. His attorney argued that the evidence was circumstantial. The judge, reviewing the forensic report, the library records, the time card, and the testimony of 3 separate witnesses including Don Kellerman, disagreed. Derek Hargrove was denied bail pending trial. The exoneration hearing for Marcus Cole was held on a Friday. It lasted 40 minutes. Marcus sat in the courtroom in a borrowed suit, navy blue, slightly too large in the shoulders, donated by Gary at the halfway house who had once been a banker before his own life had gone sideways, and he listened to the judge read the order of exoneration into the record. The Honorable Margaret Chin, Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas, concluded her remarks with the following. The court finds that the conviction of Marcus Eugene Cole in 2006 resulted from the deliberate fraudulent actions of a third party, and that Mr. Cole was entirely innocent of the charges against him. This court expresses its deepest regret for the 18 years of wrongful imprisonment Mr. Cole endured. 18 years. Said out loud, in a courtroom, by a judge, it sounded like something different than it had felt from inside it. It sounded enormous. Permanent. Marcus Cole kept his hands folded on the table in front of him, and he did not cry in the courtroom, because he had promised himself in the parking lot of Ridgemont Correctional that he would not spend any more of himself on grief than he absolutely had to. He saved it for the car, on the way back to Kettlebrook, when Catherine Voss kept her eyes on the road and gave him 5 quiet miles to himself. 5 minutes. Then he straightened up and looked out the window at the Pennsylvania hills and said, "What happens to the house? Sycamore Drive?" Catherine asked. "My name is still on the original mortgage." "Was. We need to look at that." She glanced at him. A slight smile. "Already did. It's complicated but not unfixable. And Pennsylvania has a wrongful conviction compensation statute. At 18 years and the severity of the charge, you're looking at a significant figure from the state. Plus Kellerman's filed a civil suit against Hargrove this morning. Don Kellerman asked me personally to make sure you knew he wants to make it right." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, what does significant figure mean? 7 figures. Possibly. He looked back out at the hills. "Okay," he said. "Okay." He called Lily from a borrowed phone on a Saturday in April. Spring had finally come to Kettlebrook in a serious way. The trees along Hollow Creek Road were full and green, the kind of green that seems almost aggressive after a long Pennsylvania winter. He had driven out to the cabin that morning. Driven, because he now had a used pickup truck, a 2009 Ford F-150 with 140,000 miles on it, bought for $4,000 2 weeks after the exoneration. The cabin's roof had a blue tarp over the damaged corner. The fallen tree limb had been cut away and stacked for firewood. The door had a new lock. He sat on the tailgate of the truck in the April sun and called his daughter. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello. Lily. It's your father." A long silence. He didn't try to fill it. "I know," she finally said. Her voice was careful, controlled. The voice of a 20-year-old who had prepared herself for this call. "I read about the exoneration." "I know you did. I'm not calling to. I don't want anything from you right now. I just wanted you to hear my voice. To know I'm here." Another silence. "I didn't know," she said, and her voice broke on the last word. "I didn't know what he did. I didn't know any of it." "I know," Marcus said. "I know you didn't." "I'm so sorry, Dad." The trees along Hollow Creek Road moved slightly in a warm April wind. "Don't be sorry," Marcus said. "Just come see me when you're ready. I'm not going anywhere." He was not going anywhere. He had 14.5 acres of Pennsylvania forest. He had a cabin that needed rebuilding, beam by beam, wall by wall, roof section by roof section. He had hands that knew how things worked, a mind that needed to understand them, and for the first time in 20 years, he had time and ground and the specific kind of purpose that only comes to a person who has been forced all the way down to nothing and discovered, at the bottom, that nothing was not actually the bottom. Walter had said, "Build something." So that's what Marcus Cole did. By the following October, the cabin had a new roof, metal, gray, installed by Marcus himself over the course of 3 weekends. The collapsed wall had been rebuilt with reclaimed timber sourced from a demolition site in Kettlebrook. The wood stove was cleaned, relined, and burning. The windows were new, double-paned. The floor, wide plank pine, original to the structure, laid by someone 80 or 90 years ago with the same patient care that Walter Cole had brought to everything he touched, was sanded and sealed. Marcus had added a small covered porch on the south side, facing the tree line, where the afternoon sun came through in long diagonal bars in the late afternoon. Lily came on a Saturday in October, A day when the Allegheny Hills were on fire with color, every shade of red and gold and burnt orange that Pennsylvania can produce when it tries. She drove up the Hollow Creek Road in a small hatchback and parked behind the F-150. She got out slowly, looked at the cabin, looked at her father standing on the porch. She was 21 now. She had her mother's eyes and her father's steadiness. She looked like someone who had been through something hard and had decided, carefully, to still be open to the world. She said, "You built this." "Rebuilt it," Marcus said. "Someone built it a long time ago. I just made it right again." She walked up to the porch and stood beside him and looked out at the tree line. "Uncle Derek is going to trial in January," she said. "I know." "Mom," she stopped. Started again. "Mom is having a hard time." "I know. I don't hate her. I just don't." Another stop. "I need some time with it." "That's okay," Marcus said. "Time is something I've gotten pretty good at." She almost laughed. Not quite, but almost. They stood on the porch for a while in the October light, father and daughter, on 14.5 acres that Walter Cole had bought with cash on a Tuesday in 2003 and registered in his son's name without fanfare, because Walter Cole had loved his son in the specific way of men who don't make speeches, who instead buy land and hide proof in wooden boxes and write careful letters in the handwriting of men who learned to write in one-room schoolhouses. "He knew," Lily said. "He knew," Marcus said. "Being thrown away is not the end of the story. Sometimes you're not being thrown away at all. Sometimes you're being planted." Marcus Cole sold $12,000 of timber rights from the eastern section of the property to a sustainable forestry company and used the income to hire 2 young men from the Kettlebrook halfway house, men like him, men trying to rebuild something, to help him with the larger construction work. He paid them fairly. He taught them what he knew. He applied for reinstatement of his electrical contractor's license. The application was accompanied by a letter from the state attorney general's office confirming the wrongful conviction and exoneration. The licensing board approved it unanimously in a special session. Don Kellerman called him personally. "I want you back," Don said. "Same seniority. Same salary grade as if you'd never left. Benefits from day one. I know it won't fix what happened, but it's what I've got." Marcus thought about it for 2 days. Then he said yes. Not because he needed it. The state compensation, $1.3 million, approved by the legislature under the wrongful imprisonment statute, had seen to that. Not because he had no other options. Because Kellerman's was where he had been good at something. Where he had been trusted. Where he had been, for 7 years, exactly what a man wants to be, reliable. And he still was. He just had a different address now. 14.5 acres on Hollow Creek Road. A metal roof. A wood stove that worked. A porch facing south. And every Thursday afternoon in the fall, a 21-year-old woman with her mother's eyes who drove a small hatchback up a gravel road and sat with her father in the late October light and talked, carefully at first, then more easily, the way things go when the hardest part of the truth has finally been said out loud and there's nothing left to guard against. Starting over isn't the end. It is, if you're paying attention, the exact point where the Rayall story begins. Walter Cole's letter still lives on the shelf inside the cabin. Not in the box anymore. On the shelf, unfolded, held flat by 2 smooth river stones Marcus picked up from the creek bank last spring. Where it gets the morning light through the east window. Where he can read it whenever he needs to. He doesn't need to very often now. But sometimes, on particularly hard mornings on the 11-mile commute, on the days when the weight of 18 years tries to settle back on his shoulders like it has a right to be there, he reads it again in his memory, the way you read something you've known long enough to carry. Don't let them make you feel small. You never were. Not for one day. Not for one day. If this story stayed with you, type the word rebuilt in the comments. One word. That's all. I want to see how many people understand what that word means. And if you know someone who is in the middle of their rock bottom right now, someone who has been told that what happened to them defines what they're worth, send them this video. Not with a message. Just the video. Sometimes the right story finds someone at exactly the right moment. Let it. This has been a story about what survives when everything else is stripped away. About the proof that gets left behind by the people who love us quietly and without fuss. About the difference between being thrown away and being planted. And about the fact that starting over, really, genuinely starting over, is not the same as losing. It never was. We'll see you next time.